Um, but before we jump into that, next week we will be having Ask an Editor. So that means that our editors from Tomeworks are here to answer your questions. So if you have questions, please let us know through whatever means you have for accessing us. That can be Meetup or Facebook or Instagram or Discord
Discord.
server. If you have any questions that you want us to address. But in the meantime, we have handpicked a curation of questions that we've received before, this time about starting your novel. So, both how to actually get your butt in the chair and write it, and how to best open a novel.
Ooh, that
So
opening
talking,
line is
yep.
so dicey.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So talking about opening lines, opening chapters, opening scenes, but also how you can just like sit down and get started on writing one. But that is a problem for next time. For now, we are talking about fan fiction, something that I am passionate about. Um, and so why should you listen to me about this topic? My name again is Daphne Straussert. I am an author of romance and speculative fiction. I write sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and in basically all of those, I have people kissing because that's what I like to write. I'm also an editor specializing in genre fiction, but specifically horror and romance. I'm the founder of Dallas Fiction Writers, a social writing group in Dallas. We meet twice a month, doing write-ins and just social gatherings. I'm also a review coordinator for an independent publisher, Horror Addicts, and I write fan fiction under the tag Daphne the Writer. But first, what is fan fiction? For those of you who don't know, fan fiction is fan created works of fiction that are based on already existing characters and stories. So you take a story, a world, a series of books, TV, movies, whatever you want, and you use those characters and that world and those scenarios, and you create your own stories based off of it. These are usually published online. The most popular outlets for them currently are Archive of Our Own, otherwise known as AO3, fanfiction.net, and Wattpad. Sean, you mentioned real life people, and we will be talking about real people fiction as we go
Oh,
into this.
the actually traditionally published mysteries featuring a stumbling Biden when he was Obama's vice president are hilarious fan fiction, brought into actual publishing and stuff, like there are so many things out there. There's so many tags on AO3 that you do not want to search. Such and such X, another person who exists.
You say don't want to, but it is kind of a fun experience. AO3 is by far the most, well, I guess that's not true. Fanfiction.net is dying. Wattpad and AO3 are extremely popular. Wattpad also has original fiction, whereas AO3 really is a strict fan site. Um, but so why do people write fan fiction? Because typically because they love the fandom. But also fan fiction allows writers to play around with new ideas, characters, stories, and they do all of this without having to do a lot of the heavy world building that goes into creating original fiction. There's already a built-in audience of people who are going to read your stuff just because of the fandom that it is a part of. So you don't have to worry so much about reaching your readership. It also allows for you to receive immediate feedback because these people are going to be reading your stuff and commenting and kudosing and letting you know what they like or don't like pretty immediately. So you post a chapter, you're probably going to have some feedback within a very short amount of time, which is very nice. And I think that fan fiction is an excellent exercise for growing writers. I think that it's a great way to try out new ideas and workshop some things, play in a little sandbox, without having to commit to the full writing a whole novel or whole series. Um, and as a bonus, you can later turn those fan fictions into original fiction, which is what we are talking about today. Um, Before we get into the next section, you might be wondering, Daphne, why can't I just make money off of my fan fiction? And that's complicated. Um, Mostly it has to do with copyright law, right? So you're never going to get a traditional publisher to publish fan fiction because that is a violation of intellectual property. They're not going to be allowed to make money off of it, and you will likely get sued. The self-publishing route, you're not going to be allowed to publish on Amazon or Ingram Spark, anything like that, Barnes and Noble, if you're publishing fan works, because again, violation of copyright and intellectual property. Um, if you do get caught doing it, there can be some harsh consequences. So while there are ways to make money with fan fiction, it's an extreme legal gray area that we are not going to be touching on. So we will be touching on how, or we will be talking about how to turn fan fiction into original fiction. We're not going to be talking about how to make money off of straight fan fiction. But Daphne, it's not original. It's not original, Daphne. If you're writing fan fiction, you're right. It's not. But nothing on this earth is really ever new. There is no such thing as a truly novel, truly new idea. Everything has, in fact, been done before. So really, don't hand wring over whether or not fan fiction is considered original enough. Um, from the very beginning of stories, which we'll get, it'll be older than Dante's Inferno, but from the very beginning of stories, we have been adapting other people's stories. So Dante's Inferno, this is Bible fan fiction. This is Dante's self-insert Bible fan fiction, where he goes and explores what the afterlife looks like from his own perspective. Shakespeare wrote adaptations of historical events in a fictionalized way. So all of Shakespeare's histories, those are fan fiction, real person fan fiction, as we talked about earlier. Le Morte d'Arthur is an actual written account of Arthurian legends, which is an oral tradition that gets put down. Same with the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those are fan fiction of mythology, so fan fiction of religion. Um, so we see Greek tragedy or Greek plays. Those are also going to be based off of either real events or oral stories that are being um, adapted. So this is all fan works. In a more
I'll
modern sense, go ahead, Sean.
I'll point out as well, all of these existed before the idea of copyright and all that. So people did make money on it back then. There wasn't the framework for it to go after somebody for, copyright infringement in ancient Greece, and you could certainly get a meal for your performance of it, etc. So it's a very different situation today.
I will have to go back and study the emergence of copyright as a tool to keep people from using your stuff because as much as I've talked about intellectual property and as much as I've talked about the public domain, I actually don't know where this all started from. Um, but that would be a fun exploration for next time. So, in terms of more modern retellings or more modern fan fictions, we have any fairy tale adaptation that's going to be considered fan fiction. So we have Beastly, which is this is the movie based on the book, which is a fairy tale retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, the beautiful one from the 90s with Brandy. Um, Also, another fairy tale retelling, therefore fan fiction. Um, which basically all of Disney. Like Disney does not have a lot of unique or original concepts. Almost all animated Disney movies, especially historically, have been fan made things. It is a retelling of a book or a story that had already been published and but boy will they go after you if you use any of their copyright stuff. Um, if you like Sherlock Holmes has in the past 10 years, I believe all of Sherlock Holmes is finally in the public domain. Um, but Sherlock Holmes has been a very prominent fan work that keeps getting reworked and reworked and reworked. Um, Vampire fiction. Now, this is broader, but basically every vampire book, story, movie, TV show draws in some way from Dracula, at least in the Western tradition of vampires. Almost all of our understanding of the vampire legend comes from Dracula. So everything gets to be Dracula fan fiction. And then very recently, well, not really, but very recently in terms of the latest movie adaptation, Wicked. Wicked is a fan work of The Wizard of Oz, the book that turned into the play that is now the movie. All of these are adaptations. So creating fan works, nothing to be ashamed of. You go do that, enjoy yourself, and then hey, let's find a way to make some money off of it. So the easiest way to make money off of a fan work is to do something that's already in the public domain. So that's going to be Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Winnie the Pooh, all of Winnie the Pooh now, um, Sherlock Holmes. Those things are all in the public domain. You can absolutely write a story based on those and pitch it to a traditional publisher and could get published with that. It might be difficult because a lot of people have adapted Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland, right? Those things have definitely been done. But you can absolutely make those. Now, as you are doing that, make sure that all aspects of the original material are in the public domain. So either up until I think last year, Tigger was not in the public domain, but Winnie the Pooh was, so you would have to watch out for that. But also, what I mean is you can adapt The Little Mermaid, but you cannot call her Ariel because that is Disney's property. You can adapt The Princess of the Frog, but you cannot call her Tiana. So you got to be careful about what things you're adapting. Both Shannon and I have covered aspects of the public domain pretty extensively. So if you look back at our old videos, you can go find out more about how to work with things that are in the public domain.
Tossing it in the chat as well. The newly public domain things for 2026, not as interesting as in the past few years. Like you said, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, and the history of copyright law. So first one was in England in 1710, and of course that was not, that's probably very difficult to enforce at the time. So probably we're looking at, like 1860s onwards for that, and it back rolling into kind of third world countries and stuff like that, well into the 20th century.
It is worth noting that different countries have different copyright laws. So Japan very famously allows for fan adaptations of things to be published. They're called doujinshis, which I probably pronounced incorrectly, but they do allow that. However, most of that stuff has been licensed in the United States, which would mean that it would be subject to United States copyright law. So you're not going to be allowed to make a fan work of Naruto or Bleach or Hunter x Hunter without stepping on some US toes that someone's going to care about. All right. But we're not talking about the public domain. Nope. We're talking about converting fan fiction of things not in the public domain into straight original fiction. So, some terms you're going to want to know as we're going through this. I am very in the fan fiction community. So, if I use a term that you do not know what it means, please raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Let me know that I'm doing something that you don't know what I'm talking about because I might not realize it. But here's a few. AU means alternate universe. That means we're diverging from the universe that the original work took place in. So that might be Harry Potter, but we're talking about a coffee, it's in a coffee shop, or they're spies, or under the sea. Just it's not what it was originally. It's an alternate universe. RPF means real person fiction. The real lives of people cannot be copyrighted. So you can write fiction about real people. Um, and we're going to talk about some of those very famous adaptations when we get to our examples. OC means original character. That would mean if you are creating a character for your fan fiction that does not appear in any way, shape, or form in the original canon, that's an OC. Reader insert are stories that are written from the second perspective where the reader is the character. So these will typically have like you as a character. You walked down the hall, you said his name, those sorts of things. Sorry, I'm hearing my child cry in the background. Um, so let's do some notable examples. City of Bones, written by Cassandra Clare in 2007, features a 15-year-old girl who discovers a hidden world of demon hunters. If you would anyone like to guess what this is based off of? This is going to be kind of a fun game. If you know what this is based off of, please toss it in the chat. Ryan says Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Give a few more moments for guesses before we do the big
Oh, I'm
reveal.
going to go much further back. I'm going to say it's based on Greek mythology.
Uh, no, it is, in fact, from Harry Potter. It was originally a Harry Potter fanfic in which Draco Malfoy and Ginny are dating, and so the only holdover left in City of Bones from its fan fiction origins is that the main male character is blonde and the main female character is a redhead. That is it. She has scrubbed everything else. City of Bones is a lot of fun. It's very, very 2000s YA. Next up, Fifty Shades of Grey, very famous erotica written by E.L. James, published in 2011. An inexperienced literature student named Anna enters into a BDSM relationship with the billionaire Christian Grey. Anyone guessing what this is from? Sean says it's Twilight.
I love the idea of a fanfic of a fanfic of a fanfic, like
I
there
mean,
it might be possible to find this, like somewhere based on.
it's turtles all the way down. All right. So yes, Sean, indeed it is from Twilight. The only thing left of Twilight really, in Fifty Shades of Grey is that it is set in the Pacific Northwest. Everything else was changed. Cinder. This one's written by Marissa Meyer, published in 2012. A gifted but ostracized cyborg's life becomes entangled with a prince in an intergalactic conflict. Now, there is an obvious and a not obvious answer about what this media is based on. Sean says it's from Cinderella, but what else? What was it originally a fan fiction of? Tasmia says, is it a Cinderella retelling? It is a Cinderella retelling. That is true, but it was originally written as Sailor Moon fan fiction. It was a Sailor Moon Cinderella retelling. Um, which comes from the now it does involve an intergalactic conflict. It is the Lunar Chronicles, and so that is a little bit of a hint toward that. But yeah, that was a fun fact I learned while I was researching this because I also thought it was just a Cinderella retelling. Point Pleasant, written by Jen Archer Wood, published in 2013. A man returns to his hometown after 13 years to uncover a supernatural mystery and rekindle a relationship with his best friend. What original media inspired Point Pleasant? There are wonderful details on these covers that are actually little Easter eggs, and I'm enjoying them. Shannon says Supernatural. Sean says Buffy, or Supernatural question mark, and then Buffy. It is in fact Supernatural. It was based off of a Dean and Castiel fic. You can see the main character on this cover looks, yeah, very Dean-like. And then in the
That's
background,
what I was thinking. I was like, okay, you said look at the cover, and I was like, oh, that's Dean.
well, but then you look a little closer and you've got a shadowy
Like an
figure in the
angel.
background with butterfly
It's
wings.
an
Now,
angel. Yeah, I thought.
Steel
Yeah.
is an angel, but the wings are a pretty great giveaway. That was fun. I actually might need to read this one. This one looks like I might enjoy it. After, written by Anna Todd, published in 2014, a sweet college girl meets a tortured bad boy and starts a tumultuous relationship. What is the original media of After? There's a whole series of these. Tasmia knows what this one is. I do like, so it is interesting, and we'll talk about this more later, but it is interesting that on the cover, it is very obvious that this was a fan fiction because they're using it as their selling point. A billion readers online, Wattpad sensation, that's fun. That's not something you would have seen earlier in this. And Tasmia is correct. It is, in fact, a Harry Styles fan fiction. It is One Direction fan fiction. There are multiple examples of One Direction fan fiction that made it big. Um, I don't personally enjoy real person fiction, but I'm not going to yuck someone's yum. I know there's things I write and read that other people would not enjoy, but yes, this is in fact based off of Harry Styles. There's another famous one, also based off of Harry Styles, and it's important to note that these I don't remember the name of the other book, but these two books have vastly different characterizations of who he was. Harry Styles in this one is portrayed as a tattooed bad boy with like an angsty past, And then the other one has him be like a soulful, sweet, but kind of a playboy guy. And so it's interesting how you can have different interpretations of the same actual literal person. Game Changer. You may know this more famously by its sequel called Heated Rivalry, which is now a giant HBO hit. But Game Changer is the first one. It was written by Rachel Reed, published in 2018. The closeted captain of a professional hockey team has a secret relationship with a barista. What is it based off of?
I'm just naming hockey teams.
Who is it? It's real person fiction. Um, Once again, the cover is kind of a hint on this one, but honestly, only if you know the fandom. All right. It's Marvel, and the MCU specifically. So this is a Captain America Winter Soldier fan fiction. This was an AU, in which Steve is a hockey player and Bucky is a barista, and they get together and have a secret relationship. 2021, we're getting pretty recent now. The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. A PhD candidate starts a fake relationship with a notoriously grumpy professor to convince her best friend that she's moved on from her ex. What is it based off of?
I'm trying to remember the name of Eddie Murphy made it, remake of it. The Blob was in it. That math
Blubber.
professor. Flubber, yes! Flubber, fanfic, that's my guess.
Well, Tasmia knows the T. It is Reylo. This is Star Wars. And when you look at the characters on the front cover, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that does look like them. Ali Hazelwood has a STEM degree and knows what she's talking about, and that has become her niche in the world of writing. But yes, she did in fact write a Raylo college AU with these characters and turned it into contemporary romance. 2022. We'd know by then, written by Kirsten Bowling. In a world where you can only see color once you meet your soulmate, a woman has always seen color. When she meets someone who may be her soulmate, things get complicated. I tried so hard to make a little two-sentence summary of this book, but it is complicated. The setup, you have to explain the setup and then you also have to explain it. So it's a little harder to, this is what we would call a high concept story, which is it's right? Yeah, high concept story, which is it's a little more difficult to explain. Any guesses on what inspired We'd Know By Then? This is also, hold on, saw a chat. Coloring books, no. This is also Star Wars. This is also Reylo. I find this interesting because the literary world was like shocked by this when it came out. Not shocked, but like they were like, oh, what an interesting concept. What a unique concept. The idea of not seeing color till you see your soulmate. This has been all over fan fiction for the past 10 years. This was not a new concept. It was just not done in original fiction until very recently. And so when I saw the description of this movie, I was like, really? Yeah, but it's unusual for the fiction world. In the fan fiction world, soulmates are extremely popular trope, and there's a number of you don't know your soulmate till whatever, right? They have your arm is tattooed with the first thing they say to you, or you uh have matching tattoos and you have to go find the person in the world that has your matching tattoo, or your eye color matches, or there's all kinds of things kind of like this that get thrown around in the fan fiction tropes. So it was interesting to see this one. And our final one, this one came out last year. The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy. An assassin, oh, by Bridget Knightley. An assassin and a healer are forced to work together to cure a fatal disease. What was the original media? Sean says Marie Curie. Tasmia says Harry Potter. Tasmia also says Christine Feehan's Dark series also uses this as a foundational element of the series. The main characters lose their ability to see, male main characters lose their ability to see color and feel emotions gradually unless they meet their soulmate. Absolutely love the series. Tasmia, you and I are going to have to talk about this because I started reading the Dark series, Christine Feehan's The Dark series, way too young. But I have been reading that book for almost the entire 20 something years that it's been those books for like the 20 something years that they've been published. I love that series. Um, so yeah, a little bit of a deep cut for me for you to mention that. It is Harry Potter. It is a Hermione fic. In fact, there were three Harry Potter fanfic adaptations that were published last year. Um, and that is wild to me because the Potterheads are growing up and writing their own stuff, and getting it published. And I hope to see more trans inclusion in those books, um, as part of it. Anyway, so this was fun. So this has been going on for a while. And it's only now becoming more socially acceptable to admit that things were fan fiction prior to them being original fiction. Because for a very long time it was like the dirty secret, right? You don't want to admit that you were writing fan fiction. In fact, most people that got traditionally published would absolutely scrub the internet of any indication that they had ever written fan fiction whatsoever. But it's becoming
Daphne,
more it's becoming more acceptable.
Daphne, can I ask this as well? Are there any legal ramifications to admitting that something, started as fan fiction? Like in the case of, let's say, like film and stuff like that, sometimes people do an interview and they'll be like, oh, this was so inspired by that film or that media. And I don't think anybody's ever gotten called out, like gotten in trouble for that. But, I wonder in the case of a very litigious society or an author who feels like they've been slighted or Disney, if you say it too early, like, I wonder.
That is also something I wonder, and I think that that is a concern and why a lot of people don't admit that things were fan fiction. But it it has to be very clear. And you have to still be violating that copyright. And so if you have gone through the work to make it an original fiction and there really isn't much left over from your original source material, then they don't have a leg to stand on. There's lots of books have been inspired by other people's stuff. But it is extremely hard to prove that something is a copyright infringement without it being pretty blatant. Someone got in trouble for going after people for pretty basic concepts, right? Like there was a woman who went after another author for using her character had sun powers, sun-based powers, which is a very basic thing to have and not something that you could really consider copyright infringement. I don't know. I'd have to look for um I'd have to look for any cases where they actually, in terms of like literature fiction, where they actually succeeded in a copyright claim that wasn't pretty overt. Mhm. All right. So, how does this happen? How do we get these books? There's two ways. The first is what we're going to call the pull to publish pipeline, which is when you become a really successful fan fiction author. An agent or publisher notices your work, and then they help you turn that fan fiction into something publishable. So this is you getting discovered out on the street, right? This is like if you're just walking down the street and a director comes up to your car and says, I want you to star in my movie. This is an insanely unlikely thing to happen, but it has happened. Um, how does this happen? Well, if you write a very, very popular fandom, right? So you have to write something big. So that's going to be Supernatural, Marvel, Harry Potter, Twilight back in the day, right? Something with a huge following. You write an extremely popular pairing, which is you're going to be writing something that a lot of people, something you'll notice about all these books, they usually are romance or have romantic elements. Because a lot of the time when people are looking at fan fiction, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a romantic escape. A lot of fan fiction is saying, I liked this media. Now let's go have them have sex. That is a lot of fan fiction. And so there's a reason a lot of these books are romantic, because that is what fan fiction does. So if you write an extremely popular pairing, you still have to get noticed by all of the readers. So you have to become an extremely popular author on these fan fiction websites, and you have to get extremely lucky that an agent is even considering this. E.L. James, who published the 50 Shades of Grey, was picked up by a publisher specifically looking to poach fan fiction talent. So the now defunct publisher, God, I forget their name. The now defunct publisher that originally published 50 Shades of Grey was going onto fan fiction sites, finding extremely popular fan fictions and approaching the authors and saying, "Hey, we'll give you a publishing deal if you make this into original fiction." That was their goal. And they got extremely lucky that that worked out. But the company doesn't exist anymore because that's a very difficult thing to make work. So this is the pull to publish pipeline. If you are already out there doing your fan fiction thing, keep doing your fan fiction thing. Maybe you'll get picked up. It is significantly less likely than even the stacked odds of trying to pursue traditional publishing. This is truly like a meteor out of the dark hitting you is the likelihood of this happening to you. So don't count on it. Um, so how would you turn fan fiction into a publishable novel? And for this, we're going to assume, well, I guess first let's talk about this. So if you modify fan fiction enough, it's indistinguishable from original fiction. My husband doesn't really understand fan fiction because when I talk to him about AUs and things like that, he's like, well, but that's just original fiction, right? So if you are writing, for example, if you're going to write a Fast and Furious fan fiction where there's no cars, it's set in space, and for some reason Dom's a vampire, that's nothing like Fast and Furious anymore. That is completely original fiction. Um, so go ahead and go write that, right? But know that what you're writing at some point is just, you're just writing. That's just original fiction. And you can make that work. So what we're going to talk about is, let's assume you already have a fan fiction. I am not in any way encouraging you to go out and write fan fiction as a means to create original fiction. That is doing twice as much work. You do not need to do that if your whole goal is just to write original fiction. But if you already write fan fiction or you already have a fan fiction that is written, how can you make it something that you can either pitch to publishers or agents or that you can self-publish without worrying about it? First of all, you want to find the essence of your story. So this is asking, why did I write this? What is it that makes this story special? What made it different from the source material? So that might be what characters you focus on, the kinds of emotions that you're looking to bring out in your readers. What kind of story were you ultimately trying to write? If you are writing, Hello Kitty fan fiction, but you have it be dark and gritty. Yeah, that's a big departure from your source material. And that's something that you should look at to be the essence as you're refining your work. So starting with your characters, very basically, you have to change everyone's name. You might be able to sneak in a single character having the same name. But I would personally, I wouldn't risk it. But you need to change your characters' names. That is window dressing. That's super easy. What gets more difficult is when you're talking about changing like backstories. So, for example, if you're writing a Thor fan fiction, so you've got Thor and you've got Loki. So you've got these two characters, blonde, brawny, a little bit of a himbo, and skinny, black hair, kind of a dick, right? You've got those two characters. If you're going to put that into original fiction, you might need to flesh that out more. Either change up their appearance, which is next, but or you're going to have to add in more siblings, a different dynamic, so that it's not obvious that that's what you're parroting. Do you change their appearance? The answer to this could be yes or no. But one thing you'll notice about a lot of the examples that I pulled at the beginning is that those appearances really didn't change. It's maybe the last homage to the original material that the author might cling to. And that's because appearances aren't really copyrightable. A kid with black hair and glasses is not necessarily Harry Potter. A blonde, brawny guy is not necessarily Captain America, right? So those appearances, because we're just talking about real people, um, or real people, quote unquote, those aren't necessarily things that need to change. Now, if you're talking about aliens, so if you are creating a blue alien with a tail that's 7 feet tall, that looks a little bit too much like the Navi from Avatar. So watch out for that. Do you need to change the appearance? Up to you. Um, my last point is to flesh out secondary characters, and this has less to do with copyright and more about writing advice in general. What makes fan fiction so successful is that readers are coming in already knowing a lot of your backstory. They already know a lot of the premise. They know the characters' histories, and so you can have a different jumping off point for fan fiction than you do for original fiction. And when you are making the changes, you have to flesh out things that normally are taken for granted. So secondary characters that are people might already know them from the fandom. No one knows them in your original fiction. You really need to make sure that you're introducing them properly and you're not creating a world of just uh, thank you, Ryan. I love your comment about blonde, brawny hunk, probably played by a white guy named Chris, is so generic the MCU has three of them. Yes, it is. That's just blonde, brawny guy. Um, so pay attention that you are not creating a story that's flat. Often because fan fiction focuses on a romantic element, a lot of the secondary characters fall to the wayside. So don't fall into that trap. Make sure that you're giving all of your characters um, the necessary background that they need. Your setting. Making a fan fiction into original fiction is often about stripping away the world building. So the easiest fan fictions to adapt are going to be AUs. So if you have taken Hogwarts and turned it into a coffee shop, or if you have the Fast and the Furious guy is working at a flower boutique, that's going to do a lot of that work for you. If you try to if you're going to retain a story that contains a school where they teach magic, you have to really watch out that you're not just stepping all over those toes. So when you strip your world building, though, make sure you put it back. If they're living in a kingdom far, far away, make sure that kingdom has a name and you're thinking about the social structure and you're thinking about how it's governed. Um, because if you just take out everything and leave your characters in a blank setting, that loses reader interest. It's about taking out all the things that are identifying information and filling it back up with new and interesting things. So, like I said, this is not easy. This is not a shortcut to writing original fiction because you are doing all of that work twice. Make sure that your setting is a living, breathing character just as much as your people are. That you don't have just your characters talking in a blank room. Make your setting feel vibrant. And as you do that, you might find that it's then affects your characters, it then affects your plot, and you're starting to deviate more and more and more away from your original source material, which is good. That's the goal. Your plot. Another thing about how fan fiction is structured is because it is published online chapter by chapter, it is often paced like a serial, not like a novel. Go back and learn about different novel outlining techniques. I have a YouTube video for us about outlining your novel that's totally worth looking at just to make sure that your story is not a series of events chapter by chapter, but it actually has your overarching arcs that you need for it to feel satisfying to your readers. Pay attention to your word count. When we read stuff on AO3, we might not flinch at 300,000 words, but a publisher certainly is going to. Look at what your word count for the genre you're looking for. Look at what it should be. So if you're writing sci-fi fantasy, that's like 100 to 110. If you're writing Contemporary romance, you're looking at like 80,000 words. I've got a blog post about word count, why it matters, and what those word counts should be on the Toneworks blog. But make sure that your story is the correct word count for what you're trying to publish it in. Make sure that it's paced like a novel, not like a serial. And then give your story enough introduction time. Fanfics start out fast because you want to get to the meat of the story immediately. So a lot of the time, fan fiction's first chapter is their inciting incident. Your inciting incident in a novel is going to be about 10% into your book. So you need time to introduce the characters, introduce the setting, because again, your readers aren't going to know those this time around. You need to include those introductions at the beginning. Not to say your beginning should be boring, not to say it shouldn't include a hook, but you do need to include it because otherwise people aren't going to know what's going on, or it's going to feel very, very rushed. And finally, administratively, as you're getting ready to publish this or pitch it, you're going to need to scrub your fanfic from the internet. And that's because if people can still access your story on the internet, then they might not bother to buy your book. So you want it to be the exciting thing for people to look for. But remember that you still have fans and you want them to know where to find you. So tell them about you publishing this, right? Fans often, especially if they've enjoyed your fan fiction works for a long time, are looking for ways to support you. And since you can't really get support for fan fiction, like monetarily, they might be very, very excited to see that you've created something into a book. I've received in my fan fiction time, I've received a number of people being like, "Can I get a physical copy of this? Not of my fan fiction, but if I publish it as a book, you could." Um, so let them know where you're going, but you also do have to disappear. And then back to the question that Sean had asked earlier, do you tell people where it came from or not? Do you tell your agent, hey, I'm pitching, or tell agents you're submitting to, hey, I'm pitching this. It started off as fan fiction and I got 500 million views off of it. Because if you are going to tout how popular it was, it's got to be really popular because they're not going to be impressed by a couple 100,000 views. That's kind of chump change. So personally, I wouldn't tell them, but that's up to you. It is becoming more acceptable to tell people that it came from fan fiction. If you are self-publishing it, do you tell people? Depends how popular it was. Again, like I think it's more acceptable with self-publishing because it is you making that calculated jump on this. Um, but that's a personal decision. I don't think there's really a right or a wrong answer in
Can I
this.
think, Daphne, when it comes to
Yes, sure.
self-publishing? Um, in your description, in your copy for your Amazon listing page, and also for Barnes and Noble, you are not allowed to use other authors' names. So if you are banking on that this is fan fiction, you may need to look at a different style or only mention that on your website because they will take your listing down if they catch you trying to sell your book using somebody else's name.
That's fascinating because I have seen a number of Amazon listings that are pitched kind of how you would pitch to an agent, be like, "Oh, if you loved this and this by Stephen King, then you'll love this novel." Are you really, you're not allowed to put even that?
Usually not in the copy. Like if you have reviews from people who used other authors' names, you can get around it. But like if you look at the actual description, they could get in trouble for that. Like if you go into Amazon's rules for what can go in your copy, that's technically not allowed.
Awesome. That is good to know. Thank you so much. Um, but you could put published as such and such, right? Like the original fanfic name in there. You just wouldn't be able to
Yes.
reference the fandom or
Yes,
the
you
fandom
can't you
author.
can say like originally published on Royal Road, blah 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 blah, but not actually mention like Stephen King or I don't know, D.H.
Interesting.
Lawrence. I guess you could probably say, I don't know. But like, you know what I mean? Like you're not supposed to say, if you love D.H. Lawrence's blah, 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 you'll love this. Like you're not allowed to do that.
I have seen so many copy do that though. That is wild to me that they're all just like risking it.
They don't know, and Amazon's not consistent about enforcing it. They usually focus on the ones that are egregious for very like big name authors. So if you did Stephen King, you're probably going to get in trouble. If you did, another romance author who's close to your status, you may not. But just know it's there, and Amazon is a pain in the ass to deal with if they decide to do transgress and like shut your store down.
Fascinating. Very good to know. You did a presentation on Amazon listings a couple of months ago, right? Or you did a
Oop.
blog post.
No, I did the one about making your Amazon listing, and that was where I found that out because I didn't know either.
Self-publishing scares me. It's self-publishing and traditional publishing are scary in completely different ways. Anyway, all right. Now would be the time. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. You can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand. But I am Daphne Strasser. You can find me at daphnestrasser.com. You can also find me on tomarksedits.com. Email me at daphne@tomarksedits.com. And find me pretty much everywhere on the internet as Daphne the Writer. That's Instagram, Facebook, a number of places I don't actually use, like Threads, and as well as you can find all my fan fiction through Daphne the Writer. Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. Remember, next week we are doing Ask an Editor, where we will be talking about beginning your novels. New year, new start.
And always so important to look at and re-revise and figure out exactly where the beginning of your novel should start. So I love the idea of setting good habits and having a disciplined writing I have it moving into the new year, as well as talking about all those ways that hopefully an editor can help you out I figuring out what's the best way to grab someone's attention and keep it.
Yeah, it's not just your opening line, it's what comes after it. Your opening scenes are so important too, but we're gonna go over that in more detail next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daphne.
Yeah. Meanwhile, everyone go follow Writer's Lunch. You can find us online as Tomeworks Edits. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you are, Blue Sky,
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. That's right. We
LinkedIn.
have a following on LinkedIn. And that way you can stay on top of what's coming up with Writers Lunches as well as in-person events that we have in Dallas and Houston. Um, Question from Tasmia. What rights do we have for any fanfic that are published on something like AO3? You don't. That is so fan fiction is an extremely gray area uh of legality. So if someone were to take your fan fiction and publish it, which was happening on Etsy, people were stealing people's fan fictions and printing them and selling them as hard copy books. This was a problem. The only recourse you have is to report it as copyright violation, not of your copyright, but of the original source materials. That is the only thing you can do. Because it has been untested in court. AO3 makes a lot of promises. Like if you look at what AO3 believes in, they have like a legal fund and things like that, which is they're willing to go to court and fight for the idea that fan fiction is fair use. Fair use means I'm allowed to create it, I'm allowed to distribute it, I am not allowed to make money off of it. So the legality of saying, well, I used this other person's IP to create my fan fiction, which is an original work of my mind, right? Original, it was created by me. Um, Saying that, but you're not allowed to make money off of it because of how copyright works. You're not allowed to infringe on other people's ability to make money off of their intellectual property, which is where the legalese of it comes in, right? So Anne Rice sued people for making fan fiction of Interview with a Vampire successfully enough that people got scared and stopped making it. It was never fully tested in court that you're not allowed to make fan fiction of works. Um, I think for that to truly get tested is gonna take a really big author making a really big fan fiction of something like Disney. For Disney to be willing to go after them, for the author to be able to fight for it. Like, I don't think that we're really going to see this played out in court unless somebody takes a very big risk. Um, your specific question, if someone tries to publish your fan fiction, what can you do? All you can do is report it as copyright infringement for the original material. If someone were to copy paste your fan fiction on AO3 and go post it on fanfiction.net, you've got nothing. That's unfortunately, you have nothing that you can do about that, because the rights of fan fiction authors really haven't been established.
I do
Awesome.
want
If
to
there's any
say,
more
and you said it
questions,
happened
uh,
on Etsy, but about 3 years ago, there was bot activity that took swaths of AO3 and released books en masse on Amazon. Um, and that was like a huge, huge deal for about, I'd say, 3 weeks before it all got cleared up. And what she said, one of the things that they found out was that the way Amazon, like, complain about stuff, like, how do you report this? Said, this is my copyrighted material. So it was hard to actually, like, do something correctly, because if you had written it and it was fan fiction, it wasn't your copyrighted material. So Amazon has changed that. Amazon also now limits the amount of books a specific person or entity can publish, down to, I think it's 3 a week now. It used to be like one a day, and then before that it was unlimited. So
Incredible.
they are doing some stuff to kind of curtail bot activity, which does sort of help you, if somebody tries to do that targeted attack kind of thing again, where they just like en masse take entire works from AO3. But like Daphne said, you'd have to report it, and finally find somebody at Amazon who's like, oh shit, we have a problem.
Yeah. Oh, that made me well, not only were bots scraping fan fiction sites for publishing it on Amazon, which is horrendous. It's also your fanfic is in AI, by the way. All fanfic has been used to train AI models. It's why certain concepts show up so much when people try to use generative AI to write things. It sounds very fan fictiony, and that's because they were all trained on fan fiction. Because yeah, so it was trained on the Omegaverse. So the way you know that the publishing world is affected by fan fiction is because Omegaverse has been published. But yeah, AI was trained with fan fiction, and there's no recourse you have for that. There are some authors, book authors for original books that have made a settlement with, we talked about this when we did our year in review. They got a settlement for their stuff being scraped for their copyrighted stuff being scraped for AI, which was how we found out that a bunch of stuff hadn't been copyrighted properly. Um, but yeah, your fan fiction's been used for AI, and it's very upsetting. So is a niche question, but if someone is writing fan fiction, can they use things like Patreon to generate an income by, say, selling early access to chapters? Not something I want to do, but I've heard about it. You absolutely can do that. Patreon does not really make any attempt to regulate what you're putting out on your tiers. You can do that. Could you get sued for it? Absolutely. But that would again be suing you for making fan fiction and making money off of the fan fiction. So it is about as legal as just selling chapters. Or if you want to be a commission artist and write fanfics to people's specifications, you can also do that, but that's still just as legally gray. What's interesting is that fan fiction and fan art are treated extremely differently. So if you go to any comic book convention, you will see the artist alleys. And the artist alleys are absolutely filled with trademarked images that have been redone, or there's fan fiction, or they make decals out of them. And that stuff is largely unregulated. Fan fiction artists or fan art artists make a lot of money off of commissions, and absolutely nobody regulates it. But fan fiction is kind of gone after, right? If you decide to make an X-Files anthology with short stories based on the X-Files, you are going to get slammed so hard. Um, yeah, it's different. It's not the same. It's not treated the same, and I find it really interesting. All right. That is about all the time we have. Make sure to follow us, and we will see you guys next time.